All right. Thanks again for waiting on me. It's been a while since I recorded an episode, so I appreciate you hanging out, lending me your attention again, so we can hang out together. It's just been a while just because, I record these as I feel I should, and it's usually just based on obviously a thought that I had or an event that happened to me or somebody else and the lessons that come from that. And I have been taking some notes. I got some things I want to share here pretty soon. So I got a little bit of a backlog, so that's kind of cool. So there'll be a few more of these coming up real soon. But yeah, it's just been a minute, and it just has. So, but thanks for sticking with me, showing up again. And speaking of things that happen to other people, that's kind of what I wanted to share, a lesson that I kind of learned and took away from somebody else's event in their life. I'm not going to share the event because it's kind of irrelevant, because we all go through things, positive and negative, and we have some negative feelings and emotions that come from this stuff. And I wanted to share what I felt was a takeaway from what had happened to a friend of mine. And I did talk to this person about some things as well, so and they kind of agree. But essentially, something happens, and inevitably we are going to respond negatively. And of course, there's always things that good happen, of course, right? But in this case, we're just talking about the negative emotions. And so the negative emotions happen, and it's very easy, like I've said before, and like you've probably experienced yourself, to get wrapped up in these emotions. And the emotion is okay. The thought is okay. Whether it's something really bad that you want to do to somebody or to yourself, like the thought of that is okay. The feeling is okay. It is just the action of it and acting on that thought that makes it detrimental to us and potentially not okay for yourself and for others, maybe. And that's where the separation needs to happen. And this, what I kind of learned from having a discussion with my friend, was that you have to have this little pause in that time where you're having these flood of emotions, because those floods of emotions have been said to really only last maybe a minute or two. And after that, it's kind of our fault for sitting in those and holding on to those. And once you can sit with those for a minute and let yourself feel those emotions, then there needs to be a pause, and there needs to be a response, not a reaction, because the reaction is what gets you in trouble. The reaction would be something like, oh, I don't like the way this goes, screw this, or screw this person, and I'm just going to go out drinking with my buddies. And you go out drinking with your buddies, or whatever their vice might be, and they pretty much, they don't really help you. They just tell you what you want to hear, because your mood, it makes them uncomfortable, and they would rather just sit and drink with you and tell you, oh man, yeah, that's okay, man, you did the right thing, and this other person is at fault, and don't worry about it, it'll be all good. And that really doesn't help. There's no positive feedback in that situation. And on top of that, potentially you might not feel so great the next morning after you wake up and drown your sorrows, because your sorrows are still going to be there and you haven't dealt with them. And now you physically feel horrible, and you still have to deal with those emotions and those consequences that came from the event previously. And so you kind of have to ask yourself questions when you can train yourself to give yourself that pause. Questions would be something like, what am I reacting to? And then change that word reaction into response, because reaction is something it's a quick thing, right? And our reactions are innately just embedded in us, right? We react, something flies at our face, somebody throws a ball at you, you react to put your hands up and guard, right? There's There's not a thoughtful response to that. It just happens. And that's kind of how we treat our emotions. We just react. And, sometimes that's okay because the reaction is what you need in the moment. But what I'm speaking of here in this event, it's not what you need. It's not what this person needed. And by the way, they didn't just react. They responded healthily and took care of the situation, and they learned from it and grew. But anyway, so you ask you questions. Why am I responding this way? What can I learn from this? Things like that, right? Because that takes you away from the emotion. It gets your mind thinking about it. And then you can make a positive choice, right? Once you can kind of step away, like another question could be, what do I need to do to heal this? Or, what do I need to do to make me feel better? What do I need to do to learn? How do I need to get clarity on this, right? And we all know you can't really get clarity when you're just covering things up with alcohol or drugs or whatever the vice might be. And it reminds me of, in martial arts, we say you ask questions in sparring or a fight or something like that. And by asking questions in martial arts, that could be in the form of a jab or a kick, or maybe footwork in a certain direction, because you're asking the question to your opponent and to see how he's going to respond, or she is going to respond. We'll just say they. See how they're going to respond. And it's a game. And if you don't ask questions, you're not going to learn anything. And then your opponent's going to beat you because you're staying the same. You're not learning anything. And they will overcome you. That being said, your emotions in these times that show up in your life, those are your opponents. And if you don't ask the questions to your opponents, you're not going to learn anything. And your opponent, your emotions, will beat you down. And you won't learn anything, if that makes sense. So it's very important to find the response instead of the reaction. The response gets you, like I said, out of the emotional bind that you're in that causes you to make poor decisions. So I'm just encouraging you, and of course myself, because I am not perfect either. I go through this as well. Every day I have to, at some level, I have to manage this myself. So I just wanted to make you aware of realizing that you can take 2 minutes out of your hissy fit, out of your emotional baggage, and ask these questions to find a positive response to it, to what's going on. And thankfully, my friend who was going through these things, instead of going out drinking with his buddies, because that was their option, they called a friend that was actually a friend, somebody that was going to actually give them good feedback, and they had a good conversation. They had, in their words, they had a vulnerable conversation, which is good. And they still don't necessarily know what needs to be learned from it, but at least the step was taken. And now you know that that's the direction you need to be going. So I hope that was clear. I feel like it was. So that's good, because it's about feeling. That's pretty good. And really just, again, bringing up more awareness about the options we have in these situations, bringing awareness to the words we use when we categorize these situations. Like I said, reaction versus response. Changing words and catching yourself which words you're using really does make a difference. You should try it sometime. But anyway, I appreciate you hanging out and listening and giving me your energy so we can create this moment together. And as always, have a beautiful day.